Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. So I see the live interpretation, so I'm assuming they can hear me, which is great. Bienvenidos. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining. I wish we were in person. Last year was the 20th year of conducting this conference at UCLA specifically, and luckily we were able to hold basically the last in-person conference for this organization before we went into the full shutdown. So it is a vast understatement to state that what we've been through has been very difficult and incredibly challenging. And my heart goes out to all of you and your families, especially if you've experienced loss, direct loss, or you know, you've had extended family members or friends that have succumbed sadly to this to the virus. And I just wanted to extend, for what it's worth, my condolences if you've experienced that loss. My heart goes out to you. Thank you for joining us, especially under these, again, vast understatement, extenuating circumstances. In terms of the origin, you know, I always think it's important, especially as I get a little bit later in life, and I reflect back in terms of the origins of the conference and the organization. And much like the previous speakers have stated, you know, law school wasn't necessarily built for us. And I definitely experienced that when I was at UCLA. And it goes without saying, I'm an incredibly proud Bruin and a Berkeley Bear, a Golden Bear. But you know, it was definitely challenging being the first. So in terms of the organization itself, I was the first year student at UCLA. And hopefully one day you'll get to see it in person. But, you know, there's a student lounge, like I'm sure there is at every law school or every, you know, yeah. And I can't remember exactly. I was taking a break, and between classes, or it was in the evening, I was about to start studying, I was about to go into the library, but I took a break. And it so happened that at the time, there was an LSAT prep course being conducted in one of the classrooms. And I guess the school was renting out space to a company that was focused on test prep. And the instructor was actually a law student, not at UCLA, but at a rival school across town. You put the pieces together. But we're all family here, no doubt. So no rivalries here. It's a safe space. And I overheard a really interesting conversation because, of course, I'm on my own business because I was raised by my grandmother, right? And the conversation that ensued was something to the effect of, what does it take to get into your law school? And I found that to be, you know, my ears immediately perked up. And the instructor informed the student, who was a man of color, well, I'm not sure. And he should have stopped there, right? He should have stopped there. But unfortunately, then proceeded to tell the student, well, I'm really not sure. I imagine the LSAT has to be in the high 170s, and the GPA has to be, you know, some astronomical figure. And I knew for a fact that was not correct. That was not correct because that wasn't my story, and arguably I got into a better law school. Again, that's the only jab I'll do, right? So of course, you know, I intervened and I introduced myself, saying that in spite of appearances, I'm actually a law student here, and let's talk. And he's now an incredibly successful lawyer here in Los Angeles, and I'm really, really proud of him. And it got me thinking, you know, how can those of us that care about this, and we're the first in our families, or even if we weren't the first, those of us that have navigated this process arguably successfully, impart wisdom and impart, even if it's not wisdom, at least knowledge and a perspective on those that are, you know, coming up behind us, right, or following us into this journey. And that's how we started. And with my really good friends from law school, we started the organization. And once we started practicing and had a little bit of money, incorporated and founded the organization a little over 21, 22 years ago. So incredibly proud of it. So that's the story. And of course, you know, I couldn't be hanging out in the student lounge all day because I had to study myself, and proudly passed the California bar on my first try, and you know, and off we went. With all that being said, you know, it is an independent nonprofit. I don't speak for the law school. Again, I'm incredibly proud of my affiliation, principally with the student organizations and the students themselves. again, I take it as an enormous point of pride that we have been doing this now long enough that for the most part, when we hold these events at the different law schools, it's students who actually attended a conference when they were preparing for law school, their law school applications. And I take that as an enormous point of pride, and I'm so incredibly proud of all of them, and thank them profusely, especially during these incredibly difficult times. I can't literally, law school is hard enough as it is. I can't even imagine doing it in a fully remote environment with all the challenges that are going on. So again, I can't words fail me to truly express the gratitude that I have for all of them and for all of you for attending. My purpose or my goal for all of you today is to give you an overview of the law school application process. It will not be specific to UCLA, but I think a lot of it applies. I think the 90+% of it applies to all ABA accredited schools. I always go into this with a goal. My goal for each and every one of you is to be admitted into an ABA accredited school, preferably of your choice, with a full financial aid package. That's the goal. Easier said than done, right? And that's why we're here. I would be remiss, however, if before delving into the specifics of law school applications, if I didn't deal with one specific topic, and that is, unfortunately, the devastating and pernicious, and I don't have enough adjectives to properly describe it, but toxic impact of insecurities and self-doubt. Sadly, insecurities and self-doubt do manifest themselves in some incredibly destructive ways in this process, namely and most specifically in individuals committing acts of self-sabotage. To be more specific, delay, not taking the process seriously, not reviewing the materials, not applying to sufficient schools. For many of us, let's be candid and let's be honest. Imposter syndrome is real, right? There's a lot of trauma that you have probably endured, and I'll just speak for myself, that is endured. And being in settings where necessarily you feel like you don't fit in, and then you get accepted, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, they made a mistake. Like, why am I here? All that stuff is real. You're not making that up. That's not a figment of your imagination. For what it's worth, I can validate that in fact is a true, genuine feeling. And unfortunately, in the span of an hour, there's absolutely nothing I can say or do to make that go away. At a bare minimum, what I offer to all of you is honesty and directness and candor and friendship. And all of you are my colleagues, and I want to see all of you be incredibly successful in what you do. To the extent it helps and assuages any of your concerns, look at how far you've come already. Look at that. Take pride in that. And really take pride in that. Like, oh yeah, I'm proud. No, to really sit and, not arrogance. I don't think it's mutually exclusive to have pride and honor that, and honor your achievements and everything you've accomplished. And the participants who, I see it's about 228 or so, that are in this virtual room, you're not the ones that I worry about. I worry about the other 300 that RSVP'd. And again, I don't cast aspersions or make judgments, and things happen, no doubt. But I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've had experience that there's people that sign up for these events and never show up. And sadly, it's because they're scared. And fear, again, is real. And every day you wake up, and especially in this current environment, you face it head on and have been successful. I know for many of you, especially now more than ever, are the leaders in your families, right? You're the ones that are scrambling to get your grandparents a vaccine, right? You're the ones that have been navigating this process, especially for our most vulnerable communities, which we all belong in, right? And you're the ones that do the interpretation, right? And are navigating the websites for those that don't have accessibility to the systems that are in place right now to get vaccinated. And you're the ones that if they get a letter or they get correspondence or something from work and they don't understand, you're the one that's been helping them every day, probably since you were little kids, right? And that's leadership, and that's tenacity, and that's grit. And congratulations. That's what's gotten you here thus far, and will continue to ensure that you are successful. And my goal for you is, how do you translate that now, that amazing skill set that you have, into being successful in the law school application process? And I'm very confident that you will be incredibly successful. Again, for what it's worth, I like being underestimated. To me, being underestimated is a gift. It truly, truly is. One of my favorite stories, I'm getting a little older, so I like telling stories, like my grandparents. May they rest in peace. When I was initially practicing early in my career, I worked for this amazing litigator, or one of the people I had the pleasure of working for, is an amazing litigator in private practice. But for pro bono, or for free, his community service at the time was actually to take on police brutality cases in the Central Valley here in California. And he's such an amazing, I mean, in terms of, how he makes his living, is he's actually, when the case actually goes to trial, and what they call bet the bank, basically it's if you lose this case, like it'll undermine the entire company. So he's called in to actually try the cases, to go into court. Just an amazing person. And he was so good and so effective that when departments in the Central Valley, or city councils in Central Valley, knew that he was going to be taking on a case, they would immediately try to settle it, because he got these amazing verdicts that in essence almost bankrupted them. And so just a very egregious cases. And he told me this wonderful story one time when he was early in his career. He showed up to a deposition, and opposing counsel, was just sitting there and didn't even acknowledge him. And then he mumbled to his client, he's like, I wonder when counsel is going to get here. And he's like, oh, I'm here. Let's get started. And it just, of course, just took control of the whole situation and just decimated it. Sorry, I see a chat here. Can you read something real quick? Sorry about that. Oh, great. Thank you. I got a quick time check. And that's what I mean by being underestimated. It's at times it's a gift. So take that for what it's worth. I also have to acknowledge the role of gender roles and traditional gender roles in our families. Again, I'm not one, and I have absolutely no role in judging anything, and that's not my role. And I hope people don't take offense to what I'm about to say. But that's also really real, and that, of course, I can only speak to it to a limited degree, because being the eldest male in my family, there's definitely advantages and privileges that I had that if I had a sister, or if I was a woman, I probably wouldn't have had. And I suspect, just based on the RSVPs that I saw, probably about 70 to 80% of the attendees are women, and women of color. And again, thank you for everything you're doing. Your leaders in your family. Again, what I can share is, you face a lot of internal pressures in terms of expectations, probably some very traditional notions. And again, you've been navigating that successfully thus far. What I can share, and from my experience, and being married to an amazing woman of color who's an attorney and a UCLA Law alumna, is, guess who's going to be there with you when you graduate. Hopefully you're going to have the graduation ceremony in person, crying and asking you for legal advice. It's going to be all the men in your family and all the other people in your family that were, probably concerned in terms of and providing some challenges along the way. So, by the way, you shouldn't be providing any legal advice. You're not members of the bar, so I don't want you to get in trouble. So with that, let's dive right into a little bit more of the mechanics of the application process. From that lighthearted topic, let's talk about the LSAT and the GRE, right? And I will not start doing logic games or any of that. It's not what I do, and I frankly have zero interest in getting into the details of that. But let's talk about, generally speaking, the preparation for it. It is, again, I tend to be very direct to a fault. the numbers are important. Let's just be clear. The numbers are important. And I know even by saying that, I have some trepidation in saying that because I know the stress level is already high, and I can imagine it's going up to the nth degree. But again, I wouldn't be doing you any favors if I didn't emphasize that the numbers are truly important. That being said, the numbers are not the end of the story. Otherwise, the application would literally consist of name, how do we contact you, and your numbers, and that's it. And obviously, that's not the only factors in the application. Hence why they ask you for a personal statement. They ask you for letters of recommendation, for resumes, for supplemental statements, depending on the programs that you're applying to, right? It is holistic review, but again, the numbers are important. What I will share about the LSAT, and again, a lot of what I'm going to say is, quote, common sense, but sadly, when you're under an incredible amount of stress, common sense tends to go out the window, right? So I do want to state these things because it just needs to be said. You need to adequately prepare. What does that mean? Again, I don't, we're here on a voluntary basis. I don't make any money from the test preparation companies. I'm glad to hear that some class is being raffled. Presumably that was donated. And thank you to the student organizers for making that happen. The reason why I need you to take a prep class, ideally that helps you prepare utilizing real questions that were previously administered, is because guess what? What is 99.9% of the other applicants doing? They've taken a prep class, right? The timing is really important. And again, what's happened with the pandemic is things that we were advocating for years and years and years are coming to fruition. It's interesting. It's a very interesting development in terms of what's going on. I'm sure all of you have seen the numbers have just skyrocketed. That probably makes you incredibly nervous and say, oh my goodness, I don't have those numbers. Apply. I mean, if there's a takeaway, you want to go to law school, you need to apply. There's just no way around it, right? And what better time than now? And I'll get into a little bit more about that later on. But there's no better time than now to apply, and don't get scared off by, all the news articles that you're seeing regarding the applications and the scores, right? And we've all read those articles. Okay, fine, that's a fact. It's always been competitive. It's always been competitive. Hence why we do this conference, right? Part of it is just to demystify the process and give you some tools that you may find helpful. Okay. You need to take a prep class. You really do. And especially do it under the time conditions to replicate as closely as possible, especially now in a virtual environment, the conditions of a test. And at some point, once you're, quote, ready, whenever that is, at some point you just have to make a decision and take it. If you've taken it multiple times, don't worry too much about it. You can explain that, especially if there's a deviation, or if there's a difference between scores. You just explain that and you ask them to accept your higher score. Okay, with that, let's start discussing the admissions process. And again, my main goal for all of you is to get admitted to an ABA accredited school with a full financial aid offer. And I take what I call a strategic approach to the application process in order to achieve that result. But before discussing the nuts and bolts of the application process, I think we need to. All of you are going to be attorneys, right? And what do you do as an attorney? You analyze and you think of cases deeply, right? In litigation, you develop, or at least the way I was trained, you develop what's called the roadmap to victory. What is going to be your strategy, and what, if this happens, then this, if this happens, then that. But before even, I used to play football, but even before going into the field of play, you have your playbook, right? But before that is like, what is the goal here? Specifically, what are they looking for? Why are they asking for these numbers? Why the why the personal statement? Why letters of recommendation? Why a resume? Let me read to you from an admissions policy from a law school. And let's start to unpack this a little bit. In evaluating each applicant, the School of Law places substantial weight on traditional measures of academic ability, namely grades and LSAT scores. We also recognize in our evaluation that other factors and attributes contribute greatly to a person's ability to succeed as a law student and lawyer. When assessing academic promise and achievement, the applicant's entire file will be considered, including economic, physical, or other challenges that have been overcome, scholarly achievements such as graduate study, awards, or publications, the rigor of the undergraduate educational program undertaken, and letters of recommendation. This is an academic assessment. It's an academic assessment. That doesn't mean that devotion to community service, your background, your goals, the reason why you want to go to law school are irrelevant. They are very relevant. But ultimately, it's an academic assessment. And rightly or wrongly, the reason it's an academic assessment is because you are applying, again, arguably to one of the most rigorous courses of study in the country, the study of law, right? Again, I say that with a bit of trepidation because I don't want to stress you out further than you already are. But again, I would be doing you no favors if I didn't give you an unvarnished perspective. And again, it's only my perspective. Take it for whatever it is. Take it with a grain of salt. You should be taking it with a grain of salt. Don't accept everything that I say. Ultimately, it's your application and it's your career. They want people that are going to be successful. Now, the challenge here, let's go back to what I was originally talking about fear and insecurity. Hopefully, that's not being converted like, oh, I'm not going to be successful, right? And that's what I mean by insecurities, fear. That's the way it manifests itself. And maybe I won't be successful. Maybe you don't employ the strategies that I'm going to be discussing, right? So that's the way it's really quite mischievous the way it works. And again, there's unfortunately no way I wish I could alleviate you of that over the balance of time that I have. But at least by unpacking this a little bit and giving you some tips and some advice, hopefully it will guide you and provide you some a little bit of solace in this process. The reason why numbers are so important is because assumptions are made. Assumptions are made. If the numbers are high, the assumption is that you're really intelligent. If the numbers, quote, are not really high, what's the converse of that? What's the assumption? Right? The assumption is that maybe you're not as intelligent. Now here's the question. Is the assumption correct? Hopefully all of you are saying, absolutely not. Not for me. You don't know me. Hopefully it's a little bit like, you're indignant. Absolutely not. How can you judge me based on an LSAT score when the correlation between LSAT and success as an attorney doesn't exist, right? At best, maybe it has some correlation with bar passage, right? So yeah, it's really unfortunate. My main point here in terms of overarching strategy is you need to develop an application strategy that will defeat any negative assumptions an application review committee or individual reviewer may draw from your numbers or other materials. You need to defeat these negative assumptions that they may draw from the numbers. The venue, I like to think about who's going to be reading these applications. It's a committee. Typically, it's a committee comprised of different individuals, right? With different interests. Again, not to cast aspersions on them, but you will have advocates on your committee and detractors, people that are going to be fighting for you, and those that may not. The way I like to think about is you're going to be advocating for yourself via proxy. Think about what the main role of an attorney is, especially in litigation, but even if you're a transactional attorney, or whatever the case may be, is to advocate for your client. The term of art in the profession is zealous advocacy for your client. Here, the only client you should be having, or you should have, is you, and you're zealously advocating for yourself. But it's via proxy. I'll talk about interviews a little bit later, but it's via proxy, meaning your application materials that are submitted to the law schools and are then reviewed by the committee. And the advocates on that committee to provide them with sufficient information, or frankly, even an abundance of information so they can properly advocate on your behalf. And my goal for you is to have a majority of that committee to, admit you, and you're in, right? And you're going to be having that in many different settings, because as I'll get back to you, or as I'll discuss in a little bit in terms of the number of schools you should be applying to, at least in my humble opinion. Just let me do a quick time check here. Okay. So the application strategy. I discussed the role of assumptions, right? The role of assumptions, and that's really important. So my first rule in terms of the application materials themselves, and again, you're going to be like, really, I woke up early to attend this, and it's just so common sense. Again, unfortunately, common sense tends to go out the window when under very stressful circumstances. My most important rule are absolutely no errors or spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes in your application materials, and that's not a joke. That's for real. The reason why, the practical reason why, is because especially if your numbers are not strong, quote unquote, whatever that means, assumptions are being made. And if in the opening paragraph, they can't determine whether you mean weather or the weather outside, unfortunately, it's going to undercut your advocates on the committee who are arguing with you, who are arguing for you, right? Or if the materials are just replete with mistakes. And look, let's be honest, sometimes I'll read my materials, my goodness, nobody's perfect. None of us is infallible, again. But this is, for example, where you share your materials with friends and colleagues and mentors. Well, Anthony, there's a problem with that. What's the problem? Well, I'm shy. I don't want to share these deeply personal things, right? Well, I've been truly blessed. But I decided a long time ago that I would never be, quote, wealthy enough to afford to be shy. Because being shy is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly expensive. Going back to a little bit to the LSAT, don't take it at face value. You're the empowered consumer. If for some reason you can't afford the test prep, ask them for a scholarship. Can they cut the fee even by 10, 20%? You're the empowered consumer, right? Anthony, I don't like doing that. I don't like asking people for money. Well, I'm not asking you to grovel. You're advocating for yourself. Again, being shy and timid is expensive. And I would safely submit for all of us that none of us are in a position to be able to afford that, right? So, and this is, when I speak with admissions directors, this is a key thing that they impart on me. It's like, please relate to the students how important the quality of the materials is. And all of you can do that. And I don't say that by in any way stating that you cannot achieve this. It just takes a lot of time and effort and sharing. And again, the other thing I would I would assert to you is you're going to submit it. So you might as well share it with people that care about you, right? And mentors, and probably people that know you really well already and are going to give you some solid advice. Again, soliciting the wisdom of others is really key. And also, again, take it with a grain of salt. There's a lot of misinformation as well, okay? My next rule is apply as early as possible, now more than ever, given how hyper-competitive it is. And the reason I emphasize that is because law schools, generally speaking, admit students on what's called the rolling basis. In essence, they have a set number of seats available, and over time, they start filling the seats. So on the tail end of the process, you have the least number of seats. It is hyper-competitive. All of you, I'm sure, have heard of U.S. News & World Report in the ranking. That people law school administrators pay a lot of attention to that, right? And rightly or wrongly, the numbers, the numerics of the incoming class weigh heavily on those rankings, rightly or wrongly, however you feel about that. I want you to apply in the beginning of that process when there's the most amount of seats. It will still be very competitive, but I know that there's just more discretion early in the process than there is in the end, right? And I want you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Your materials will always be thoroughly reviewed, but again, it's not like these admissions officers have a tremendous amount of staff. Again, they will get a thorough review, but we're talking about quick reviews. This is not hours and hours and hours. I'm sure it may depend on specific circumstances, but again, I want you to take advantage of being earlier in the process for these various reasons. Ideally, usually the applications open up in September, October, and end up closing out the deadlines around February or March. Ideally, mid-November is a nice sweet spot to apply. Obviously, even earlier the better, with the main caveat. The main caveat being, do not sacrifice quality for speed under any circumstances. But then this is where I would challenge you. Is it really that you need more time, or are you avoiding? Again, that's where insecurity, self-doubt, fear will manifest itself. Delay, unnecessary delay. If you do need genuinely more time, that's fine, but just be honest with yourself, right? And that again, I cannot emphasize that enough. My next rule is you will apply for fee waivers. Apply for fee waivers. Do not assume that you do not qualify. Let them say no to you. Let them say no. Don't say no to yourself. That's another big thing that occurs, unfortunately, in our community, self-selection. We self-select out. Don't make it easy on anybody, Don't self-select out. Let them say no to you, right? Apply. Apply for those fee waivers. The next one, and this tends to be, admittedly, it's a bit of an aggressive approach. But again, I have been doing this for over 2 decades now, to age myself a little bit. So I think I do know what I'm talking about. But again, it's your career, it's your application. So you do what you feel is best. But I am a ardent believer that you will not apply to 1 school or 2 schools or 3 schools or 4 or 5. You will apply to a bare minimum, 15 to 20 schools. Yes, you heard that right. I didn't cut out, hopefully. 15 to 20 schools across the country, across all tiers. Places you've seen it on Google Maps, and that's it. You have no idea what it's like to be there. Well, Anthony, I'm not moving. I was like, I'm not asking you to move. I'm not showing up with a U-Haul in front of your house. I'm asking you to apply. I'm asking you to apply, right? Let me tell you a story. Again, I like telling stories. When I applied, I got a really good piece of advice. And maybe there's some good folks from that area, from that region on this call, or on this in this virtual conference. I got told, you should apply to University of Minnesota, and it's a really good school. It's an excellent school. And to date, I've never been there. I heard it gets really cold. I'm a Southern Californian, and I have a very specific temperature range where I'm very comfortable, right? I'm a true LA person. And I say that with pride. But I don't deal well with extremes, right? And I heard it gets really cold there. But anyway, to make a long story short, I got admitted, and I got admitted with an incredible financial aid offer. I mean, a full ride. It was amazing. They were even like going to give me lunch money. I mean, I was so excited. I love to eat. I was so excited. So once UCLA, and don't get me wrong, I love UCLA, and as you can even tell by my background. But once it dawned on us, oh my goodness, we haven't admitted Anthony. I think I literally was the last person they admitted. They weren't offering me lunch money, So did I take their offer on the spot? Of course not. What do attorneys do? You advocate, you negotiate. Imagine that. You have the audacity to say, you would be lucky to have me. Imagine that, right? Anyways, I used my big GRE words, and I called up the financial aid office, and I can't remember who I spoke to, but I spoke with somebody and said, I'm facing a conundrum here. It's like, wow, that's a big word. And, use your education, right? And, well, what's the challenge that you're facing? What's the conundrum? Well, Minnesota's offering me lunch money. What you got for me? Of course, in a much more articulate way. Anyways, to make a long story short, all my fees were covered at UCLA. They matched the offer. In order to negotiate any negotiation, you need leverage. I want you to have at least 1 or 2 schools in your pocket with very close to full financial aid offers or more lucrative offers than your target school. The only way you're going to achieve that is by applying to a lot of different schools across the country, right? Actually, I would say now every law school wants to be considered a national school. They want to be considered a national school, and therefore they want to attract students that might not be from their region, right? So geographic diversity is also incredibly important to them because they want to have alumni all over the country. Also, the other thing that I would impart on you, and I don't have a sample here in front of me. If this were in person, I'd be waving it around, and I know on video it doesn't work that well. But look at the pamphlets, look at the materials, the hard copy materials, or the websites of the law schools. This is my test, especially for hard copy materials. I count literally the number of pages before there's a person of color. We're moving on up. Literally now it's on the cover or within the first 2 pages. I promise you this, if you go in person, and unfortunately, and hopefully in the near future, we will be back in person. When you show up to the new student orientation, or when you show up to the first day of classes, and you have the welcome reception, there will be at least 1 or 2 or 3 photographers, and they are going to be taking your picture. You will end up in those materials. And here's the thing, if you're going to use me for your propaganda, you will pay me. You will pay me. Now, of course, I say that only half jokingly. Please don't show up to the financial aid office and say, hey, I heard you're going to take my picture and you got to pay up for that. Like, please don't say that. Use your big words like conundrum. But that's real. That's the thing. They want you. Once they admit you, they want you to attend. And say you get an offer of 1,000 and the other school says 0. Ask them to match it. Will you match or exceed that offer? And then the third school comes in with 5. You go to the other 2 schools. Hey, I just got another offer for 5. Another school comes in with 20. And you go round and round and round and round and round until literally they just cry uncle. They say, no more, no mas. I say, not yet. Will you give me more? I didn't grow up with a sense of entitlement. But man, this profession has nothing, it's nothing but entitled people. Entitlement. Again, I don't say that with judgment, but I think it's factual. That's a factual statement. Again, I'm not asking you to be arrogant or unkind or ungracious. I don't think being a zealous advocate for you, but also being aggressive are mutually exclusive, and being, the gentle person warrior, right? This is your career. And I think you will be incredibly hard pressed to afford to do community service if that's truly what you want to do when you're carrying $250,000 in debt, right? And that's why hard negotiations are absolutely appropriate, and I think, frankly, for us, required in this process. And again, that's why I'm a firm and ardent believer that you will apply to at least 20 schools across the country. And again, I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and I've seen it. I've seen the emails. Some schools are even inviting you to do it. Say, hey, if you have another offer, we want to know about it. Literally, it will be that explicit sometimes. And again, take them up on that. My next kind of I don't know if it's a rule, but in terms of approach or something to think about, you're not inferior to anybody. Again, that sense of entitlement, right? Never forget your role in this process. You are your own best advocate. Take pride in yourself, which in turn should be reflected in the quality of your materials. Also evidence a sophisticated understanding of this admissions process. Again, by the quality of your materials and the strategic approach that you will take. And with that, let's actually discuss the actual application materials, like the personal statement and things of that sort. In any application, there's in essence 4 basic pieces of information. There's, quote, the good things, however you define good, the good things about you that they know, the, quote, bad things that they know about you, and those are the scores. The scores are either incredibly high or maybe not. The good things that they don't know about you. is the rich, fertile ground that you need to focus on. The good things that they do not know about you. And then the bad things that they don't know about you, like, for example, there's convictions and things of that sort. You will take what's called a moral character application. Again, I don't have time to really delve into that. Again, if that's your story and that's your situation, just quick tip, you need to fully disclose. You need to fully disclose, and don't be scared of that. There's actually a lot of materials out there regarding that. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of misinformation. You can successfully navigate that. Don't self-select out. The main problem, what happens is people don't disclose, and then they find out later, and that could create a lot of different problems for you. So just disclose and be honest about the situation. And I wish we had time to discuss in much more a deeper fashion, or email me. I did put my contact information in the chat. Just unless you didn't see it, it's go to FPOC.org or my full name, Anthony Solana at forpeopleofcolor.org is my email, and just feel free to reach out to me on that or any other questions that you may have. Focus on the good things that they don't know about you. Assumptions, right? There's going to be assumptions drawn. If you don't disclose, they're not clairvoyant. They're not going to be able to read your mind, right? You need to disclose this information. For example, are you the first person in your family to graduate from school, even high school? I think that's a key fact that you should disclose. But beyond adversity, what's your goal? What are your goals? Who are you? What are you trying to achieve? Why law school? Of all the different things you could be doing, why law school? Right? And again, that's rich, fertile soil. That's your individual story. And stories are incredibly powerful. Stories are incredibly powerful. Narratives are incredibly powerful. Again, that attorney that I referenced earlier on in my talk, another thing that he shared with me is like, Anthony, when I get a case, what do you think is the first thing I do? And, I was just naive and I said, I don't know, do the legal research, just figure out what you're going to have to prove. He's like, no, that's what I have you for. What do you think I focus on? He's like, I focus on the story. I focus on the jury. And people like stories. I'm already developing the story. What's your story? What's your story, right? And how are you going to impart that on a committee? With that, the components of the application, the personal statement. The personal statement is the cornerstone of your application. I think it is it is vital. I can't emphasize it enough. It is absolutely essential that you have a powerful personal statement. The challenge there is you have very limited real estate. You have very limited room. Literally, we're talking about 2 pages, 3 pages. I know some law schools will say, oh, we'll accept up to 5 pages, or they don't state what their link is. I think it's very difficult to read past page 3, even 2. But that's just my humble opinion. Because unfortunately what happens is things aren't distilled down to the core essence. Let me read to you a sample of a personal statement, and this was the opening paragraph. The sun set 6 hours earlier, yet the temperature in Los Angeles remains an uncomfortable 85 degrees. An 11-year-old boy lies awake in the back of the family truck while his father and 2 brothers sleep next to him, with only a thin camper shell protecting them from the elements. The boy's family is undocumented, preventing the father from finding stable work. This is the underlying reason for the peculiar sleeping arrangement. Despite the obvious predicament, other thoughts interrupt his slumber on this night. Tomorrow, the boy will start school in this new country. Brimming with excitement, he looks ahead to the challenge of learning a new language and dreams of a bright future. His parents have told him that this country will offer open doors of opportunity. Though he is still exhausted from their journey by car from their homeland of Costa Rica, he looks forward to his new life. Worried about how he can help his family's financial situation, the boy decided to focus on school and learn English. With the ability to speak English, he rationalizes, will enable him to find work mowing lawns for the area residents to help contribute to his family's income. Satisfied with his newly conceived plan, he falls asleep. That's a powerful opening. I mean, you literally envision yourself in the back of that truck, right? And not all of us necessarily have that story, right? But people love stories. They love your story. Again, that's a gift. That's a gift. One thing I will state to you, what I will see though is a lot of people, and yours truly, but for example, but for my family, but for my grandmother in particular, but for her sacrifices, I wouldn't be here, and I honor that. But what ends up happening is you overemphasize others and not yourself, and people are left to wonder, well, who's applying here, right? I mean, it's a wonderful story about the person's family and parents, but you're almost lost. No, you're at the center, and everybody orbits around you, right? I know it's not what we're taught to do. It's not the way we're raised. We don't have that level of, it's uncomfortable, right? Because that's usually not how we operate. But again, here for purposes of this application, it's all about you, because it's you're the one that's applying to law school. It doesn't mean you can't talk about your family. Like, this person was, it was basically about his family and the sacrifices that they made for him. This person is a very successful attorney in the entertainment industry now, first person in his family. So yet again, you can do this. And I'm very confident that you will be very successful. We do sometimes face writer's block, and that's real. So, in terms of navigating that successfully, I'll just give you these 3 questions. You don't have to answer them specifically or put them in this type of order in a personal statement, but I think things that generally should be answered somewhere in your personal statement are, what is your story? Who are you? What are you all about? What are your goals? Where are you headed? And how is law school going to get you there? Why the legal profession? Again, not rote. That's not a formula, but, things to think about. In terms of preparing your personal statements, the good things that they don't know about you, you don't need to put that in a narrative, but just write a list. All the good things about you that they wouldn't know unless you told them. Just literally start with number 1 and just go down and keep adding to it. And then find a way, if you decide, okay, I need to put these 10 things, or these are the 5 things that I want to focus on, how are you going to translate that to the personal statement, letters of recommendation, resume, addenda to the personal statement, supplemental statements, etc. Right? Again, goes without saying in terms of some tips regarding the personal statements. It literally has to be, quote, perfect in terms of just grammar, syntax, punctuation, etc. You will share it with others. You have to share it with others. You would be doing yourself an incredible disservice if you don't do that. That means you need to start writing that thing today. You will not delay. It's going to take time. Literally I remember the first 10 drafts, literally, I didn't use them. There was nothing like my final draft. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, right? An addendum to the personal statement. Sometimes you may not be told this. I should have prefaced my entire discussion with this. Follow the instructions that are provided to you by the law schools. If they say you shall only provide X, Y, and Z, provide only X, Y, and Z. If they're not, sometimes they'll say you can provide additional information for our consideration. Take advantage of that. Or it may be silent. Take advantage of that. But exercise sound judgment. That 50-page paper that you're really proud of, probably not going to get read. But the fact that you made honors or you got an award or something, some type of distinction because of that paper, reference it somewhere, right? And that's a judgment call. An addendum to a personal statement is literally from my perspective, is literally 1 page with separate paragraphs that deal specifically with key issues. So, just to give you an example, I'll read one that's pretty short. This student was concerned because he had to withdraw from school. And what would be the assumption, especially if the numbers are not strong? Oh, he probably withdrew because of his grades. But let me read this to you. As I discussed in my personal statement, I withdrew from Cal Poly Pomona during the winter quarter of 1994 due to economic reasons. My father lost his job earlier that year, and I took on the role of a primary financial provider for my family. I returned to school in the spring of 1996 once my family's economic situation was stabilized. That addresses the assumption. that provides the advocate of saying, you're absolutely wrong. Did you not read this amazing candidate? This is the type of person we want in our law school, right? Again, this person is a very successful attorney, now practicing. If you've taken the LSAT, I remember a couple of times or 3 times and you get a higher score, note that, that you want them to take your higher score. Any extenuating circumstances, things that you want them to consider. Are there any trends in your GPA, right? Did it vacillate a lot? And then all of a sudden you had a really strong quarter or semester because you were able to focus on your studies, right? I'll share my story. I sadly, may they rest in peace, both my parents passed away during my first year in college. I became the breadwinner for my family. I went from working 20 hours a week just to provide for myself to working a lot of overtime, a lot of graveyard shifts and things of that sort. And that was my story. And I don't say that for sympathy or anything like that. And again, that's the other thing too. I want to emphasize, this is not about people feeling sorry for you. It's about acknowledging your story, and it will be respected, right? But anyways, to make a long story short, when you looked at my trending, it's literally, there was a direct correlation when I was working 80 hours a week versus 40 hours a week. My grades just skyrocketed when I was able to just have more time to study, right? So I emphasize that. And I actually had one of my professors note that in his letter of recommendation, or I asked him to. And then after the fact, I'll get into that. I wanted him to relay that and share that part of my story. Again, those are things that, but for you telling the application committee, they wouldn't know. And that's just, rich information, important information for them to know, because it places you and your scores in context, which is vital here, right? Goes without saying, you're intelligent and you're smart, right? It's just about providing the evidence of that. Now, letters of recommendation, and I'm running short on time. Probably I won't be able to answer questions. I'm sorry about that in advance. Email me, or I don't know if there's a way to capture all the questions, and maybe somebody could send them to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. But I do want to respect the time, because I know it's a very it's an ambitious agenda, and I'm so glad that you're going to have exposure to so many different speakers today. Letters of recommendation. This is an academic assessment of you. So guess who they want to hear from? Academics, academic references. Now, does that mean you cannot get a reference from work or community service? Of course not. But don't exclude an academic reference. Well, Anthony, the challenge is I went to a big school, right? And I really didn't get to know my professors. That's where you reach out, and, you tell the professor, the TA, or whoever it may be, my name is so-and-so, and I attended your class at such date, or I took your course. This is the grade I got. I'm applying to law school. They're used to this. But it's the approach, attached is my personal statement, my resume, and I would love to discuss with you whether you would be amenable to providing me with a letter of reference, a letter of recommendation. Do that early on. My general, I believe I'm a big believer that for the most part, people want to help you, but just make it easy for them to do so, right? And if for some reason they don't, then you move on to the next person, right? Again, if you've been out of school 10, 15 years, that's totally understandable. You probably will focus more on your professional life. That's great. But again, if you even then, I would still challenge you. If you can get at least one academic reference, go for it. I'll read directly from, go to the websites, which you've been going to, some will say at least one letter should be from someone familiar with the applicant's academic work, if at all possible, meaning really try to get it. Literally, the instruction to the recommender on the form from another school says, please provide a candid assessment of the applicant's intellectual and scholarly abilities, capacity for original thought, ability to analyze and critically assess information, quality and capacity of his or her verbal and writing skills. Screaming academic assessment, right? But even then, from work or community service, the theme should be, this person is incredibly intelligent, which is true. Again, I can't emphasize that enough. Again, that's where that insecurity and self-doubt rears its ugly head over and over again. But with the balance of time, what I do expect this cycle and the upcoming cycle, if the trend continues, which I do expect it will continue at least for a few more cycles, is a lot of people are going to be placed on wait lists. A lot of people are going to be placed on wait lists. Don't lose heart. At least you weren't denied. So you're on a wait list. Again, this is where aggressive advocacy, in my humble opinion, kicks in. What do most people do when they get on a wait list? They wait. Not us, friends. We will submit, I call it a letter of continuing interest, call it whatever it is. You're going to reach out to the law schools and say, thank you very much. I was glad that you're still considering my candidacy, and only if it's true. Only say this if it's true. And I wanted to inform you that if you were to admit me, I will attend. Only say that if it's true. You can soften that if it's not true, if it's not your top school. With the caveat, the contingent on the financial aid offer, right? Don't tip your hand. Don't give them leverage, right? And then provide some type of update, any update. Did you get something out, an award or a scholarship or something like that? Or more importantly, what you've been up to. Or just, again, emphasize what you think are your strengths as a candidate. Another story. When I was in private practice early on, I was early in doing these workshops, these conferences, and a student reached out to me, and he had gotten waitlisted at the University of Pennsylvania, very good school. And he's like, Anthony, I was thinking about advocacy and what you were imparting on us, and I was thinking, would it make sense for me to try to identify an alumnus or an alumna from that institution and advocate for me? And I said, that's just absolutely genius. He's like, but the problem is I don't have those networks. I don't know who that is. I'm like, I don't know anybody offhand. But, I was working at this really, quote, prestigious law firm, and I looked up at the directory, and one of the fields that you can sort by was by the law school. And so it happened the guy down the hall who I'd never really met went to Penn. So, I make my way down there and talk to him and introduce myself. Hey, I'm the big guy down the hall that, he's like, oh yeah, I've noticed you. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of hard to miss. And we start talking, and, he starts telling about his hobbies, and I'm like, yeah, he's like, I don't know, he collected butterflies. I collect people of color to go to law school, and we start chatting, and I share with him, I've actually been helping the student that just got waitlisted at Penn. He's like, what a coincidence. I'm like, there's no coincidence. I'm not here to chit chat. And anyways, both of them got on the phone, hit it off. Turns out this guy knows the dean, got admitted within the week, right? Anthony, who's your connection? That's not the point. The point is the hustle. The point is the approach. No stone unturned. Aggressive, but being a gentle person about it. Again, they're not mutually exclusive by any extent. I'm literally running up against time. I'm going to take maybe one more minute or maybe 2 more minutes, if you will please indulge me. I would be remiss if I didn't address students whose documented status, undocumented students, or however you want to phrase it. The key question is, should you disclose, right? I think for most, especially I'll gravitate more towards California. I think California are absolutely fine. They say it all the time. Other schools, again, it's a very personal choice. And I'm not going to tell you, yes, absolutely do that or absolutely don't do it. I would leave it up to you. More importantly, you are going to have to apply for scholarships and just continue doing what you're doing. My last story of the day is, if you haven't looked it up, look up Sergio Garcia, who's the first known person. I know there was people before him, but the first publicly known person to be admitted to the California bar that was undocumented. An amazing story. Went to Butte Community College, then Cal State Chico, then Cal Northern School of Law, night program for 4 years. Passed the bar exam on his first try. I mean, there's people from Harvard and Yale that don't pass their bar exam on the first try. And for some reason, the state bar that year, in terms of the moral character application, started asking about documented status, and that held them up. And it actually went all the way to the Supreme Court of California. Anyway, to make a long story short, they ended up going to the legislature and amending the Business and Professions Code, basically to allow him and allow students like him to be admitted to the California bar. And it's an amazing story. So look it up. And there's actually a case about him, and look it up if you want to do some reading. And that's my overarching story, not only whether you're documented or undocumented, is zealous advocacy. I'm so incredibly proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. Again, this would not be possible without Katie Aragon and her colleagues at UCLA School of Law, all the wonderful student organizations. Again, I can't say it enough. I'm so incredibly proud of them and everything that they do. And I'm very proud of you. And thank you for attending. If there's anything we can do to be of service to you, that's exactly what we're here for. We're a community. And I care, although I may not know you individually, I know your story. And we care deeply about you and your families. And that's the thing here too. You are breaking a cycle by you being the first, by you attaining your Juris Doctor. You're setting your family in a new path. And it's so wonderful. And I'm so incredibly proud of you. I wish you the absolute best. And I wish you well. Thank you very much.